Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully that's enough time for everyone to complete this. So just to give you a quick outline of what we're going to talk about today, especially for those who came in after we had first started, I'm going to do just a partial busting myths about the teaching profession. So you may have seen this. I recognize a lot of names here, so this will be familiar for a lot of you, but we're just going to do this for about 10 minutes just to give us a foundation and remind you of what's in there. And then we're going to talk about marketing research from this book called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And they do a nice job of bringing in and reviewing a lot of different research studies by a lot of different groups, some from psychology, some from marketing, some from economics, that tie together to give us advice on how to come up with sticky messages. And then I will also dabble in research from our own work on student and faculty perceptions of teaching as a profession to help you see how we came to the form of the Busting Myths presentation, and also the faculty version, that teaching is a best kept secret. And then I'll talk, if there's time, a little bit about our focus group testing, but I am concerned that we won't have enough time. I'll try to keep an eye on the clock, but this is new presentation and I'm suspicious that I have more here than we have time for. So I will be careful with that. So this is the Busting Myths about the teaching profession presentation. Also, I want to let you know that anytime you have a question, pop in and ask it. You can raise your hand or put it in chat. Tim will help me watch for people, because I want you to feel like you can ask questions as we go. I want this to give you the chance to kind of interact and talk about this as we go. And I can adjust accordingly. If the discussion goes one direction, I can adjust. So these are our students who were all in the classroom last spring. These are all our math and science future teachers at Mines. So to start with, I want you to think about a ladder. And if the top of the ladder, the 10th step, were your best possible life, but on the ground, not even on the ladder yet, is your worst possible life, on which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel at this time? Please don't share this. It's very personal. Just commit to yourself in your mind which step you think you're on at this point. And now that you've done that, think about where you think you'll be 5 years from now. And once you do that, I'd like people to share what they think might go through somebody's mind when they're trying to decide where they are on the ladder. What kinds of things factor into this? And it might be different when you're at the stage you're in now for your career. It might be different when you were first entering your career. If you're a new student, we've got, I think it's Evelyn right here. She's just thinking about, just becoming a teacher and becoming a professional. It might be different when you're at the point that you're about to retire, but what are some of the things that might go into this decision? Who would like to share their ideas? You can say it or you can throw it in the chat. I know you have ideas, so please don't be shy. I'll call on somebody if I have to. Cindy, what do you think?
All right, I'll go. I'm going to have to say a 9. If people don't know me, I've been a FAFSA for 37 years, and so I'm nearing retirement. So my job is pretty satisfactory. I teach what I want to teach. I do what I want to do, and yeah, I'm about 5 years away from retirement, but right now I would say it's pretty high. At some point, I think it was more frustrating when I was like mid-career and before I got tenure. So there were those stresses, but right now it's pretty good.
And I didn't mean to put you on the spot to share your personal rating. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know what kinds of things you think might go into it. So you talked about being near retirement. You talked about different stressors of your job. Does anyone else want to, oh, here, there's a bunch of things in the chat of people. I think that something people consider is, are they doing what they really like doing? And then all political things happening now are affecting how students are feeling. I think that's something people consider is happiness, financial stability. And I hear people, autonomy and decisions. I hear people share things like relationships, if they're happy with their relationship, relationships and their family? Are they able to access the things they need to access? So Gallup does this national survey. They actually call 300 and some people a day, and they have been doing this for about 20 years. And they ask them this question along with 50 other questions about healthy behaviors and different things and access to basic necessities in all sorts of different categories. And then they do different analyses. And sometimes they analyze it by your area that you live. So they might do this to compare countries, or they might do this to compare states, or they might analyze you by the data by a person's stage in their career. Or in this case, they analyzed it by particular occupation. And so if they look at particular occupations, do you think that teachers rate their lives higher, kind of on average, or lower than people in other careers? Any thoughts on that? You can throw it in the chat quickly. I see a higher. Any other guesses? A lot of you already know this. Well, I'll go ahead and show you since we have a shy group here. So teachers in the United States rate their lives better than all other occupation groups, trailing only physicians. So they're rating their lives quite highly. And the question is, why do you think teachers rate their lives so highly compared to other professionals? Anyone want to throw something in the chat on that? Who wants to share why teachers might rate their lives higher than other professionals? Making a difference? Impact on young lives?
I have a question about what Tim said. Not as high as it once was. Is that true?
I don't know if we have data to support that, though. Do you have data on that, Tim? We have been digging and digging. We have not found any data to support that beyond.
Yeah, that was more of a personal personal impression than going on data.
Okay.
I guess I feel that the politicization of education and teaching has got to have a negative impact. I still think teaching, as a profession, I think teachers and teaching would rate higher than most other occupations, but I just wonder if it's as high as it once was.
Well, the most recent data that I have is 2019, right before the pandemic, and it was still right up there, just barely behind health professions and well ahead of the other professions. So I have not yet found data from the last 2 years, but there's other data that is not indicating a big change, but not this exact question. So far, we don't have any data to support what we hear in the media, I guess.
Well, then I just said it to stir up some conversation.
That's okay, because that conversation keeps coming up lately because the media has done a really good job. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do you work with that? How do you deal with that? That's actually one of the things that's in this book. So I'm not saying we have the best way to deal with it, but it's right on topic. So don't worry about it. So lots of good things here about variety in your day, not too monotonous. Steve, I used to move furniture. Teaching's a better job than that. Thank you. Teachers impact our lives. So let me share what we've learned. So what we've done here at GFO is we have worked really hard for the last 5 years now to try to unpack this and understand why it is that teachers are rating their lives better than other careers. And part of what we've had to do is look into other careers. We can't just look at teaching. We have to look at the other side. Look at, is the grass greener somewhere else? And so what we've learned is that work-life balance is better for teachers than most other jobs you can get with the same degree for a variety of reasons. I can kind of divide it into 3 categories. One of them is kind of the obvious, which is you have a school year contract. You don't have contract that goes 12 months a year like all other jobs. There's a few examples. There's a few other jobs, but not very many where you have that flexibility. Teachers also have these negotiated 3- and 4-day weekends. They have holiday breaks that align with their families if they have kids in their family. And so teachers work very hard, but they have these scheduled times to refresh, and other professionals don't have that. other professionals, when you first start working, if you have a good professional job, you will have 2 weeks of vacation that has to be negotiated, and it's certainly not set in advance. And eventually that builds, but it doesn't ever become what teachers have. And then also teachers' day ends when the students go home approximately the same time, which allows teachers, if needed, to do something during working hours, which I really feel I'm always having trouble getting things done and phone calls made during working hours because I'm busy working. And then once I have time, nobody else's, their businesses aren't open. So there's various reasons why work-life balance actually is nice for teachers. Student and colleague relationships, teachers regularly mention how important that is and how it's a key to their day-to-day satisfaction. And then financial stability. And I have data here I can share with you to show you evidence of that. And so we talked to, we had a teacher advisory group of math and science teachers, and we asked them to list the reasons their job are satisfying day to day and anonymously. And then we shared the written responses around the room, and we made sure that the room agreed on on all of these items. And there were 60 items total, and we categorized the 60 items, and these are the groups that they fell in. And the order here just simply represents the group that had the most number of items. So there were over half of the items were related to students, relationships with students, that light bulb moment, getting to see them learn, getting to watch them grow and develop, a range of things like that in that category. Work schedule had the next most number of items. Then teaching is challenging and scientific. Their colleagues are, one of them said their colleagues are the reason they get up in the morning. Learning new content, not only do they like that they can learn new content, but it's required of you. And learning is a very satisfying thing, and a lot of people really enjoy learning new things. And then autonomy of the classroom, having control over what happens in that room. There are standards and other, there's some outside framework, but deciding what happens each day and how you're going to handle that room is really up to the teacher. So these were kind of some examples of why it's satisfying. Now, I told you we'd talk about financial stability. Throw in the chat. You'll see we've got a lot of people here, not very many chat comments, but we're doing better. Which is the closest to the typical starting salary for K-12 teachers in your area? So just put an A, B, C, D, or E into the chat, please. Excuse me. And now we've got some we've got answers going in here. Now let's do it for mid-career, 15 years into the profession. After earning a master's degree, over half of teachers have a master's degree by the time they're 30. What's the closest to a typical salary in your area? So let's get some more answers in here. This is 15 years in. See what you see if you know about it. Okay, so instead of giving you the answer to everybody's area, because there's 28 people here, I'm just going to share 4 areas across the country. Bastrop County, Texas. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That's just outside of Austin. I don't have Austin, so I was struggling to get their data because they're just in negotiations and have done some big raises just this last month. Denver Public Schools, Mustang Public Schools in Oklahoma City, and Garden City Union Free School District in New York. So 3 very different places across the country. And you can see the range here, about 45 to 65. Starting salary ranges, there's a little bit of range, but they're actually pretty consistent across the country. These are some of the lowest and some of the highest. But mid-career, you see a much wider range. But again, this Bastrop County has a 187-day contract. So if you work that out, it's $36 an hour. We like to put the hourly wage. Students have shared that this is much more meaningful to them than the annual salary because they have actual experience with hourly rates. And then there's also extra pay for work you do outside of the classroom, such as coaching, clubs, tutoring. If you sub for another teacher, all of those things come with extra pay that's already been determined by your district. And now at mid-career, and again, I mentioned the reason we show a master's is over half of teachers have a master's degree, and there are programs all across the country designed for teachers to earn their master's degree while they're working full-time. So it's completely reasonable and doable for a teacher to be a professional, work full-time, and earn that master's while they're in that career. So Bastrop County not much difference after 15 years. It's actually pretty sad. We see Texas is like that. Denver Public Schools, good increases over that 15 years. Nice solid mid-career salary. Mustang Public Schools, about a $10,000 increase, but the cost of living in Oklahoma is definitely more reasonable than Denver. Very much, definitely. And then in New York, big increase in salary, but high cost of living. So you have to kind of do a whole comparison, but you can see the range. We've got mid-career salaries here ranging from 55 to 134, just an incredible range. And we see that kind of variation all over the country. Our data finds that after 15 years, the middle 50% salaries range between 64 and 100,000. That's the 25th to 75th percentile. And NCES has data that supports this same number. So you can see there's not much below that. 55 we saw is about as low as the mid-career, but one of the lowest mid-career you'll find. But you can get all the way up to 130 or 140, depending on where you are. So the top 25% I'm not showing here is a wider range than that bottom 25%. Now the presentation goes on to talk about student loan forgiveness and scholarships. I'm going to not go into detail to back up these next did you knows because we want to talk about how we develop this and what's behind it. Most teaching jobs have better retirement benefits than other jobs you can get with the same degree. Teachers in the US retire a full 4 years earlier than people in other occupations. And behind every advance in medicine or technology is a teacher who left a lasting impression. That's the real reason why we do it and why people have really high job satisfaction is really around the difference that they make. So I'm going to go ahead and have you do the post test just so you get almost a full experience. And when you finish the post test, please put it done in the chat, and then we'll jump into the research behind this. Okay, I'm starting to see some dones come in. Should I give you more time or are we good? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone ask for more time, so I'm going to go ahead and. So this is the workshop outline I already showed you. So now we're to the point of talking about the research behind how to build the presentation. So just briefly, I'm going to mention that there's a lot more behind how we structured it and built it than just what I'm going to share today. It is based, all this work started with, we developed the perceptions of teaching as a profession, which is the PTAP, which is an instrument to measure students' perceptions of the profession. And when we learned that students had all of these, they were interested in the profession, but had decided not to do it because of just lack of knowledge about teacher salaries and teacher satisfaction and what it's like to do the job, we realized there was some kind of low-hanging fruit work that could be done here to help some people possibly pursue this career that they were already interested in. Made to Stick is the book I'm going to talk about today, and that's the marketing research book. There's also a lot of work in cognitive science and educational psychology. And this book, ABCs of How We Learn, is a nice summary of that. And that how the brain learns, that is definitely taken into consideration on how we develop this. And then multimedia learning by Richard Mayer talks about how people can take in information through visual and audio channels at the same time, as long as those complement each other, and how to develop a presentation that is clean and focuses people's attention where you want them to focus. All of that is also part of this, but not going to be talked about today. So Made to Stick is a really, if you're interested at all in marketing or developing, it's even probably helpful for teaching, just developing better ways to help people catch on to things and remember them. This book is great for that. So the key to sticky ideas is to find the core of your message. You need one core idea. So for example, Southwest Airlines years ago decided that they were the low fare airline, and that was their core idea. And then maybe the next circle in would be have fun at work. And so that helped the staff, the flight attendants, the pilots, et cetera, know what was expected of them at work, if, expected of them in their demeanor, et cetera, because there's a big difference in how they behave versus maybe a United employee. And then success is an acronym to guide you through the whole idea. It needs to be simple. It needs to be unexpected. It should be concrete. It should be credible. It should be emotional, and include stories if you can. Now, you can't always check all of these boxes, and I don't think we've checked all of them, but we check as many of them as we can. And I'll kind of show you, I'll tell you what each of these mean and provide research behind each one, and talk about how we have tried to build that into what we're doing. So step one, find your core, and then translate the core using the success checklist. And so find the core to your message. If you say 3 things, you don't say anything. And this is something that a political advisor for Bill Clinton said, and now it's really stuck with marketing research. You need one core message, just like if you're writing a newspaper article, you need one lead. And so draw from schemas is helpful. So here's some examples. So when you're pitching a movie, you need a lead, you need a core to try to pitch it to a producer, and it has to carry a ton of information with it so that you, and if you want to start guessing what these are, that'd be great in the chat, but they need to carry a bunch of information. So here, this is drawing from a schema. People know what Die Hard is. So if you say Die Hard on a bus, a lot of information is transferred in those 5 words. Or Jaws on a spaceship. Same thing, a ton of information is transferred by then making use of the movie Jaws. And so if you're developing your spaceship, it shouldn't look like this nice, clean Star Trek spaceship. It needs to be pretty ratty and rough, and because that's in Jaws. I think Roy Scheider was on a rough little boat, and decisions were made off the cuff. And so who knows what these 2 movies are? I don't see anything going in the chat. Does anyone know what Die Hard on a Bus is, or Jaws on a spaceship? Alien and Speed. There we go, Michelle. Good job. So this guided not only getting the pitch and getting the movie produced, but also guided as the movie was developed. So you can see how these 2 leads were great. So find the core to your message. Here's another example. This was something that was put together by, I think, the FDA, and it flopped. So then they asked marketing folks to help them redesign it, and it's made a huge difference. So they started out by saying sun exposure is dangerous. And then they went on to explain, and they started with a golden bronze tan is often considered a status symbol, on and on until the 5th paragraph when they start to talk about skin damage. And this, when you see blue text, it comes from the book Made to Stick. And when you see the green text, it's actually other research from like education research or from our work that supports what we're seeing in the book. So this to me also jumps out because we've learned in our work that if we restate the misperceptions, so if we were to state teacher salaries are lower, people think teacher salaries are lower, even though if we follow that phrase with, but they're not, it doesn't matter. We've just restated it and it reinforces it in somebody's brain, and they heard what they expected to hear, and that's all they hear. And so here's an example. A golden bronze tan is often considered a status symbol. Fine, done reading. That's what I thought too. I'm going to go out in the sun now. So you don't want to do that. And what they changed it to is how to get old prematurely. Skin damage from overexposure to the sun is like getting older. Okay, that's pretty lousy right off the bat. That's yucky, and that makes it sound like you don't want to get overexposed to the sun. You can see how immediately more effective it is. A bunch of the detail was missing, so you didn't get that, but they got to the point. And they mentioned the status symbol thing later, but it didn't matter. You were already just like totally grossed out by the sun by that point. So this is an example of finding the core and sticking with the core and starting with the core. So when you write a lead for a story, if you ever read a newspaper article, a journal article, you can skip the last quarter, or you can even skip the last half. You still got the main gist of it. And they write it that way on purpose. It's called the, oh, I skipped ahead. Sorry. This is a different newspaper thing. Okay. I have a job for you, and I need you to write the answer in the chat. I want you to write the lead for a story in the school newspaper. There's an opportunity for our school where every teacher gets to travel to Denver next week on Thursday and learn from a world-renowned archaeologist, a university president, and a physicist about the latest research on effective teaching practices. So it's a really cool, exciting opportunity. And I want you to write the article in the school newspaper. So to start with, what's the lead? So does anybody have want to take a awesome opportunity for teachers? There's a lead. Any other leads? Anyone want to try? This is a school newspaper. That's your audience. Okay, Cindy's the only one who's got a lead, but I'll show you. So here's the real lead. No school next Thursday. Your audience is your students, right? So, so that's the real lead. And then you can talk about why and what's going on. And that's what gets them in. Okay, so here's our lead. We decided that teachers in the United States rate their lives better than all other occupation groups, trailing only physicians. That's our lead. Is it simple? I think it's pretty simple. Teachers rate their lives very highly. It is unexpected. Here we saw a few arguments here today. It's concrete. I think it's pretty concrete. It might not be quite as concrete as their examples of concrete, but it's pretty concrete. And it's credible because Gallup did this, and they did it with a lot of people. And we also see it with multiple other people have used that same ladder question and they find the same result. I don't think it's maybe emotional, depending on what we do with it, it could be emotional, and it's definitely not a story. So I don't think we checked all the boxes here, but I think we checked 4 of the 6. I jumped too many here. This is what I was trying to say before, the inverted pyramid. Sorry, I jumped ahead. So when newspaper writers or journalists write a story, don't bury the lead. So the lead needs to be in the title, and then you just talk about it from the beginning. And the idea, it's very practical when it comes to newspapers, is that if somebody reprints the story and they only have space for part of it, the main point is there right away. There's no editing needed. You just chop it. You just chop it and you can print what you can, and that's adequate. And that's the idea behind journalism. But it makes sense. We did this with the presentation today. I showed you the beginning and then I just chopped it. When we want to do an hour, we go into more detail and we cover more facts, especially with the faculty presentation. If we can do that, we can work with the faculty presentation for 4 hours all the way down to, I have barely a 15-minute version. Just do that. We just mostly chop the bottom off. There's a little bit of restructuring. So we have a lead and we work to flesh that out through the presentation. And so, here's an example. You got a title. Right away, it starts in with the main point, and then it went on into even smaller print and just kept going. It's just how standard newspaper articles work. So we flesh out the lead, talk about work-life balance, student and colleague relationships, financial stability, and we just keep going to try to understand it better and better and provide more and more evidence and stories and reasons why this would make sense. So if we look at each of the different, are there any questions so far? Like, I don't want to just keep going. I'm hoping to have you all feel like you're part of this. Any thoughts or questions so far, or so far are you liking the direction we're going? This is useful. I hate Zoom. In person is much easier. I know Cindy's paying attention and so is Tim. We got 2 out of 28 who are liking this. Okay. All right. Well, there's a few faces if I click down. Okay. All right, cool. So simple, they have good examples of simple and why that's important. So compact, short sentences. Core, drawn from long ideas. So you're looking for a proverb, not a soundbite. So die hard on a bus, that's not a proverb, but it's drawing from long ideas. Die hard is a very fleshed out, long, deep idea in your brain if you've seen the movie. Disney hires cast members. So that's a great example. 2 words, cast members, but it changes everything about how they handle employment. You have an audition, not an interview. You have a script. You can't, it's very important that you don't go off script ever when you're in public. Everything just draws right out from deciding that their lead is that they are hiring cast members. Research on learning and cognitive load fits in with this. People can only hold so much in their brain at once. And so if it's simple and short, it's much easier to take it in, think about it, and make sense out of it. So that's the reason for simple. Unexpected, the way our brains work, we're so used to seeing what we expect to see, like the deep golden bronze tan. Okay, that's a status symbol. Okay, I'm done. I'm moving on. No, we need to surprise you. We need to say something different or interesting. That's why conspiracy theories and gossip keep you coming back, and people hold on to these crazy ideas like kidney thieves and waking up in a bathtub of ice. They spread like wildfire, and people believe them because there's so much detail, and they're so surprising, and they're so interesting, and they're also scary, shock. Some commercials will do things that are like violent or scary or something like that, and that catches people's attention. You need to turn their schema on its head. This is like in physics, the elicit, confront, resolve idea. You need to give them some information or tell them something that's opposite of what they expect, and that gets people's attention. If you look at Veritasium, I lost his name. His research finds that there's systems 1 and systems 2 thinking. That's other people's research, and he talks about how there's Drew versus Gun, but systems 1 is your quick thinking, your recall of information. Systems 2 is where you really think and are logical, and you take your time to make sense of new ideas, and that's what's required for learning. And we need to get that kind of thinking going if we want to spread ideas and give people new information. So that's why unexpected is important. So our research, our perceptions research, we've found that students' misconceptions are around salary, job satisfaction, and retirement. And students are pretty much not up to speed in what's in the media. That's just not usually top of mind. I'm not saying there's not examples to the contrary, but the things that faculty are focused on, we are finding are different than what students are focused on. So for students, they're focused on their first career, their livelihood. They're thinking about these things, and these are the things that have turned them away from teaching when they may be very interested in it. They're really worried they'll be sacrificing the ability to own a home or to own a car or to send their kids to college. So we have to show them that's not the case. Job satisfaction, they hear that teachers aren't happy. So we have to show them that actually compared to other careers, teachers are quite happy. And retirement is better with teaching than most other careers. Now for faculty, they have the above misconceptions, and they have a whole host of other misconceptions about the career. They don't realize that teachers have creative freedom and independence in a lot of what they do. They don't realize that classroom management, those relationships with students, are not the struggle that you might see in some of the movies that Hollywood portrays. They believe teacher retention is low when teacher retention is actually higher than almost all careers except for the health professions. Again, that's the doctors. And then student interest. They're very surprised at the level of the fraction of students. It's half of students who have an interest in becoming a teacher. Not all those students are going to become teachers, but they have an interest. So this is what our research has found. So we have to take what we've learned where people are not knowledgeable about the career and figure out how we can help them learn more about the career so that they can, faculty talk to students. They need to know about these different careers so that they can help students with information gathering while the students are trying to make an informed career choice. So concrete's the next one. And so here's a good example of concrete. I mentioned earlier, I'd show you that. So Boeing in the 60s, the Boeing management created a goal, and they said, we need a 727, and the 727 must seat 131 passengers, fly nonstop from Miami to New York City, land on runway 422 at LaGuardia, which is less than a mile long. So it's known to be a very short runway. That was very concrete. So the engineers went to work and they did it, and they built the 727. But they could have said, we want the best passenger plane in the world. And you know, plenty of companies have come up with goals like that. How, as an employee or an engineer, how would you meet that goal? Best plane in the world. You'd have all sorts of discussions about, well, okay, what's the best plane? What does that mean? So you can see how concrete is really productive and really moves things in the right direction. In this same chapter, they talk about the Velcro theory of memory. If you think about a piece of Velcro, one piece has all these little hooks on it, and another piece has a bunch of little loops on it. And when you press it together, the hooks grab the loops, and that's what makes it stick. And so if you only touch it in one spot, you might get a couple hooks and loops, and it's not stuck as well. And so this is their memory. This is their theory for memory. We have lots of connections, lots of different ways to remember things. It's not like we have filing cabinets and we just file it away and each memory is accessible in the same way. We need to help people hook new information and hook it in multiple ways, and then it becomes really solid and really easy to access if it's hooked in lots of places. So I'll give you a little exercise here in an example, but if you look at this compared to education research, you know, one of the recommendations is you need to give students an opportunity to really work with a new concept or a new idea in multiple different ways so that they can be building all those connections, so that they can access it different ways and build their own schema around an idea. And so here's an example. I want you to remember some things. I'm going to give you 6 things I want you to remember one at a time. So remember the capital of Kansas. Okay. Now remember the first line of Hey Jude. Okay, now remember the Mona Lisa. All right, now remember the house where you spent most of your childhood. All right, now remember the definition of truth. And how about the definition of watermelon? Okay, so what are your reflections on this? Anyone want to say, how did these feel the same? Were you accessing each one of these the same way? When did I know the definition of watermelon? Exactly. That's right. So capital of Kansas, unless you lived in Topeka, it's going to look the same for almost everybody on here. You're just going to remember this abstract connection. Okay, Topeka. Or capital of Colorado, Denver. For me, that has a different connection because I live near Denver. Remember the first line of Hey Jude, well, as long as you're familiar with the song. And the book says that if you're not, then you should go trade the book in for a Beatles CD and you'll be much happier. So if you don't know Hey Jude, you need to go do that. So very different memory. You hear it, you feel it, it's very emotional. Remember the Mona Lisa. You probably thought about that smile or the lack of eyebrows. But you saw something. Remember the house where you spent most of your childhood. That could be very rich, very involved. There could be all kinds of activities, memories, feelings associated with that. Remember the definition of truth or the definition of watermelon. And like Steve said, you might not have an official definition of watermelon. So you start to try to develop it. You're like, well, a watermelon, you picture a watermelon, you feel the taste of a watermelon, or maybe the drippiness. And then you know, well, how would I define that? So it's a whole nother mental exercise. So you can see when you're remembering something, it is not always the same. And each thing has different kinds of hooks and different amount of hooks in your memory, and it's attached to your brain in different ways. And so this is important to remember when thinking about how to help ideas. The Die Hard on a Bus brings up so much, just like it's even more than the Hey Jude. It's such an experience, and it has connected to your brain in so many ways. Credible. And so that's part of the concrete, how to make something concrete. Try to tie in with existing schema. If you can tie in with existing schema, then you can take advantage of a lot of hooks that have already been placed and that are already there. If it's credible from an authority is an obvious way to make something credible, or with sufficient detail. Sometimes people tell, you know, the urban legend about the kidney thieves. you get lots of detail about waking up in the icy bathtub and where the incision is, and there's a tube hanging out, just all kinds of nasty things. And the more detail, the more credible something is, the more you'll believe it. And they've done research that shows you add details to some side of something or another, and you can get people to totally change their view on something based on which side had more details. Statistics, but they have to be meaningful, concrete, not abstract. So often we use statistics and them by themselves are not enough. And this was super fascinating for me, but I guess it makes sense. Numbers inform us about the underlying relationships, but they're, oh, see, I jumped ahead again. This isn't the fascinating thing. But anyway, numbers inform us about the underlying relationship, but there are better ways to illustrate the underlying relationships than the numbers themselves. So for example, this is a good example. So this is an example that fits with, I just sent this to Drew this morning, that fits with everything we're working with right now. So a few years ago, probably longer than a few, a young lady who was a surfer, she'd been surfing, she was 13, I think. She was already at the professional level of surfing. So she was this fantastic career ahead of her. And she was out surfing one day and she was laying on her board and had her arm dangling in the water. And a shark came and bit her arm off. And so Oprah brought this to her show and talked about it. And so the world was shark crazy. And so can you imagine if you're someone, you know, trying to give a public message, or you're a parent trying to get your kid not to be afraid to ever go near the ocean again, or whatever it is, how do you fight this like visceral fear from this story when it turns out shark attacks are 0.4 people, I think, die a year from shark attacks. So this really is not a high risk thing, but it sure seems like, so you hear that story and you're like, I'm never going in the water again. So what they came up with was the question, which of these animals are more likely to kill you, a shark or a deer? And it turns out deer are like 20 times, no, it's more than that. I think 20 people a year die of have the car hit a deer compared to the 0.4 who die from a shark.
300 times more likely.
Oh, 300 times more likely. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was their way of battling that like shocking anecdote that convinced everybody that it was this really serious, dangerous thing. And we're seeing a lot of that in the media about teaching, because the public loves our teachers and the media has figured that out. So the media has figured out that if they can lead with a story that talks about the bad situation, any kind of bad situation for teachers, it gets an amazing amount of reads and clicks and sympathy, because the public cares very much about teachers. So the good news is that we care about our teachers and we respect our teachers. The bad news is that the media is inadvertently, not on purpose, undermining the profession and our educational system along with it, because the number of people going into teaching has dropped dramatically in the last 10 years since the media has figured this out. And so it's a serious problem. And that's why we do what we do, to try to share positive information, because, and we have not come up with the shark versus a deer silver bullet yet, but I'm going to work on it after reading this book. I'm remotivated that we can do more to fight some of these. And there's other people trying to share the facts too, but it's hard because it's not as exciting as listening to the person whose arm is dangling in the water and it gets bit off at the shoulder and there's blood. I mean, it's like the detail, right? The goriness, and there's truth to it, but the statistics say, no, it's not a problem. So emotional. So that story also had plenty of emotions with it. Humans are, this is my favorite like saying, humans are emotional creatures. Scientists are people who make emotional decisions and defend them with statistics. So that's what we're facing. So we have to help people emotionally understand that teaching is a fantastic profession compared to other careers, and then give them the statistics to feel confident about it and to back it up. So you have to make people care. And this section is super long because there's so many different ways to draw on people's emotions. And so I'm going to not go into all of it. I already cut a bunch of it out when I was preparing it, because there's a lot in this chapter that's really cool. So if you do get the book, this is a really interesting chapter. So there's sharks in the Salt Lake. I shouldn't even be looking at the chat. So you have to make people care. And there's lots of ways to make people care. So this will cover a few of those. So Sister Teresa said, if I look at the mass, I'll never act. If I look at the one, I will. And that and a bunch of research on people's willingness to donate money is what led to the campaigns that show individual children in Africa or whatever the particular charity is. And they show you an individual and tell you that how much money would really change that person's life. And the math is legitimate, but it just helps you see on an individual basis, because that's how we act and that's how we can help. If you see that there's 30,000 people in this plight, it actually reduces your willingness to share as soon as you abstract it, as soon as you take it away from the person. So it's really important for things to be personal. And if we start thinking analytically, even unrelated analytically, we're less willing to donate or less caring. So for example, if someone does a math calculation before they're asked, given this donation card, or instead, if the other group of people is told to describe how they feel after they hear the word baby, the people who had to describe how they felt about hearing the word baby donated over twice as much as the people who had to do a math calculation before they saw the donation request. So you just putting somebody in an emotional frame of mind, in a caring frame of mind, changes their response to things. And I'm not sure that directly applies to what we're doing, but it's still super interesting about emotions. I want to show you a video, and I want to be careful of the time. Let me see if there's a couple more here I can do, and then we can switch to the video. The best way to make someone care is associate something with something they already care about. Again, the word baby is a good one. Self-interest, the book says, first and foremost, try to get self-interest. I renamed that personal connection because a lot of times people think self-interest might be associated with greed or selfish things, because you hear the word self, and all of their examples showed that it wasn't the selfish things. It was self-interest as in personal connection, something you care about. If people were given a $1,000 bonus at work and you ask them the reasons that resonated the most with them, okay, if you get $1,000, you have extra money to pay your bills, or you can put the $1,000 in savings, or this $1,000 is just a token to show you that the company cares about you and the efforts that you've put into the company. The employees all chose the company cares reason as being most meaningful to them, but they predicted that their fellow colleagues would want the $1,000 for extra spending money. So people don't realize that as a whole, we care about making a difference, but somehow we perceive other people as being more self-centered. But that's not what any of this research found. They found instead people just need a personal connection and they want to feel like they're making a difference. That was really important. And that's totally consistent with why people become teachers too. But this is what they're finding for the general public. So this is personal, retire at 55, or instead of saying the world's best seed, it should be the world's best lawn, because now it's about you and what you can accomplish with this as opposed to their seed. Oh, good for their seed, right? So you can see some differences. Instead of doing these, I want to switch to the video. Well, I'll show you this one really quick. This is our best testing meme that we have with students. And so I think it's because it's emotional, and it's also just a really important fact about your life and quality of life. And now after reading all this, I wonder if I should reword it to say, as a teacher, you have, because they said it's just little wording things like, imagine if you, as opposed to just stating, all the rest of the words were exactly the same, but if they add imagine yourself or use the word you and make it first, I guess that's not first person, but that it makes a big difference. So we haven't tried that. That was something I just was reading. Dog cell. All right. So here's a video that I want to share with everyone that I think does a good job of hitting all these.
Do you want me to share the video? I'm all set to go with it. If you just want to stop sharing and I'll share the video.
For sure.
Okay. All ready to go. Should be all ready to go.
For some reason, had never thought about being a high school teacher when I was in high school. I didn't really even quite know what engineers did. Like, I kind of just knew that they were people who did science and math. And I was like, that's cool. I like that stuff. I'm gonna try this school out. I applied to be a teaching assistant for Physics 1 because I loved it so much. And I ended up getting the job, and I learned so much in that first semester of TAing. I remember being like so excited. And that was kind of the first time that I ever realized, like, wow, you could teach a subject over and over again and you still learn new things about that subject every time that you teach it. I found that when I was going through college, I looked forward to TAing way more than I looked forward to my classes, and it was always my favorite part of the day. And the more I took those engineering classes, it didn't really seem like I was gonna be super intellectually stimulated, and I am so in love with learning. I wanna make sure that I have a job that's well suited, and not even well suited, but expected of me to continue to learn. I started thinking about being a professor, and then I was like, I don't know if I love physics so much, but I don't think I'm passionate enough about physics to dedicate 6 years of my life to grad school where my only thing in the world is my love for physics. And as much as I loved it, I didn't love it more than everything else. Like, I love to read, I love to hang out with my friends, like I like playing piano, I like rafting and skiing. Like, I wanna be able to do all these things that I'm passionate about in my life while still being passionate about my job. I was walking to a class I despised, sophomore year of college setting. And I'm walking down the sidewalk and I run into my boss. And so she was like, hey, Adria, have you thought about teaching? I was like, well, I thought about being a professor, yeah. And she's like, no, have you thought about like being a high school teacher? I'm like, what? High school teacher? I went to a GFO presentation that Christine presented. I remember, one, being shocked because they were all these misconceptions that I had had for a really long time. And they're kind of big misconceptions, right? Like, it kind of changes how you think about the job, right? I distinctly remember going home, talking with my friend Mike and being like, I think I seriously want to be a teacher. Like, learning all this stuff makes me realize that, one, I was wrong, and two, that like maybe this is kind of the perfect career. I get to make genuine, important human connection at one of the most key moments in a person's life. I've always wanted, I mean, it's cheesy to say, but like this idea of making the world a better place, right? There are so many problems in the world. And hopefully in life, I'm making those problems diminish and not increase. I genuinely believe that we could fix so many problems with our country and with the world as a whole if we seriously prioritized education. Once my friends and my family saw that I was really passionate about it, they did not question it for a second. And now they are all equally as happy for me and proud of me for making the decision that I made. I feel super confident that I made the right decision. I feel really lucky that I get to be super passionate about my job. And I feel really proud when I tell people what I do.
Wendy, you're muted, I think.
Okay, sorry, thank you. I said that's one where I think we might have checked all the boxes. I think we might have gotten the simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional story in there. So if we just got to get people to watch it and to use it. And when we've tested that video with students, we do focus groups where we test all of our did you knows, all of our taglines, we test all of our photos, we test the videos, and we do focus group after focus group of students across the country, as well as faculty at these different locations. And we ask them if it increases, decreases, or doesn't affect their view of the teaching profession. And that's how if something turns off even a 20% fraction of the population, we don't use it. And so that video has tested better than I think everything that we have put together. And so we've got other videos that are good too, but the student said, I didn't think I could connect with the video better than that last one, but this is wow. So anyway, story is pretty obvious and we're out of time. So let's see, I'm gonna skip the data. I just had some data to show you, but we don't have time. So I just wanna remind you that we have resources, not just these presentations, but we have handouts, teacher salary data for different areas across the whole country, the videos, brochures, flyers, posters, strategies and tips all on our website. So if you want to use these, they're all designed to be customizable for your local situation and for you to put your own branding on them, as long as you give attribution to us. And start sharing the positives of the profession. Don't let the media, only 40% of teachers feel respected by the media. Don't let the media change the narrative.